Rufus, thank you very much indeed, and thank you all for attending. We've got about 20 minutes, so if it's okay with you, I'll talk for about 12, and then we'll have time for a few questions if you want to ask anything about the politics of the Northern Powerhouse, the rise of Corbyn. Do ask. I thought I would start by telling you, as Rufus mentioned, I do a one-man show around the country called Rock and Roll Politics. Now, I use that title partly to try and attract young people into the audience because they think they're coming to a rock concert and they get me for 2 hours. And I use the excuse of that title by saying it's a metaphor, that politics is all shook up, rock and roll politics. None of us quite know what's happening next. Now, if I'm candid with you, when I started performing rock and roll politics, politics was really stable. The metaphor didn't work. But then I got a call from Nicola Sturgeon saying, Steve, would it be all right, would it help your show if we lose the referendum in Scotland and then perform so well it wipes out Labour in Scotland? Would that help? Thank you very much, Nicola. And off she did. Then I got a call from David Cameron saying, Steve, you do this show called Rock and Roll Politics, but it's not really shook up, is it? I said, no, David, it's not. Would it help if all the opinion polls suggested I was about to lose the election and then won an overall majority? David, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Then I got a call from Jeremy Corbyn. And Jeremy Corbyn said, Steve, there's a leadership contest of the Labour Party. I'm struggling even to get on the ballot. How about it that I just get on the ballot and then win a landslide victory in the Labour leadership contest? Would that help your metaphor of politics all shook up? So I said to Jeremy, thank you very much. And all these things have happened. And now we are genuinely in a world where everything is shook up and totally unpredictable. That's great for me when I take to the stage. It's also very good for newspapers, because only newspapers have the space and the tonal variety to make sense, to entertain, to convey the drama and tragedy of British politics as it's played out at the moment. Now, my stage show goes on for hours. I've only got a few minutes. So I thought I'd focus more on the rise of Corbyn and a bit about George Osborne, who is one of the MPs from this region, and the Northern Powerhouse. The rise of Corbyn, a lot of people are saying about the rise of Corbyn, what a mystery. How has this happened? And I have to say, in my journalistic career, it's the most extraordinary thing that I've ever witnessed. This innocent rebel who has never held any post since he got into Parliament in 1983, rising to the leadership and finding as he gets there the challenges of leadership being almost insurmountable for a figure of that age and that mindset. But I do know why he got it. I don't think it's a mystery. And to explain it to you, I've done a bit of research for this talk today. I sense that before Corbyn joined the race, threw his hat into that extraordinary contest, the Labour Party was boring itself to death. The leadership contest pre-Corbyn was the dullest in history. I had that instinct. So then I looked back at the sort of things the Labour titans were saying after the election defeat and about how Labour should go forward. And it was a festival of waffle. I've got some examples for you here, which I've made a note of. So remember, Labour had lost the second time, a calamitous defeat, unexpected. Here was a chance for the titans to define the future. This was pre-Corbyn. And this is what they were saying pre-Corbyn. First of all, David Miliband, a figure who aches to return to politics, to lead his party, to show his brother how to do it. It won't happen, by the way, but he wants it to happen. This was David's verdict after the election. Episode 1 in Waffle. David, if you remember, was interviewed in New York shortly after the election defeat. He looked oddly happy, a bottle of champagne on his table. And this is what David said. We turned the page back when we should have turned the page forward. Now we need to own the future. Well, thank you very much, David. That's a very clear programme as to what Labour should do next. Next up was their great philosopher king, John Cruddas, the sort of ideas person in the Labour Party. This was John Cruddas's guide to victory next time round. We must go and visit some dark places to find out what's wrong. Well, thank you very much, John Cruddas. That's a very clear. Where does he mean? Sweden in the winter? It's not at all clear. Tony Blair, the party's great communicator, a dream to an advertiser if he ever got into that world, which he probably has done. He came and addressed his kind of adoring audience of Progress, the sort of pressure group that's known as Blairite. Now, Blair, when he wants to communicate, can communicate. But he joined this festival of waffle. And this is what he said. He walked onto the stage of Progress, you know, treated like a rock star, and he did his, it's all right, guys, calm down, you know, nice to be here, you know. Like he always did from the mid-90s onwards. And this was his thing. I've read this about 14 times. It's still, to me, utterly incomprehensible. Look, guys, we can win next time, all right? We can win next time. As long as we make the comfort zone our own, and the comfort zone is our future. Well, what does that mean? Comfort zone is our future. It was utterly meaningless. And the Labour leadership candidates pre-Corbyn were part of this dance of meaningless, vacuous waffle. Liz Kendall, one of the livelier candidates in the contest, said this when she wanted to make a defining argument as to why she should be the next leader of the Labour Party. She said this in a Guardian interview. "I went to school in Watford." Well, thank you very much. I mean, that's clearly a major qualification for being leader of the opposition. You sort of know what she's meaning by this, but it's not clear enough. And on it went. Absolute waffle. The reason being that this party had been dominated by two titanic figures, Blair and Brown, for so long that no one grew beneath them. It's different with Cameron. Cameron's a more detached leader and people are growing. They weren't growing, and they were half-formed politicians suddenly plunged onto the center of the political stage, and they didn't know what to say or do. Now, none of us knew this at the time, but in retrospect, that festival of waffle was a dream context for Jeremy Corbyn to throw his hat in the ring. Because here was someone who had no doubts, who had never had to be challenged as to his convictions. So in this festival of waffle, I went to school in Watford. We must own our comfort zone, and the comfort zone's our future. We must turn the page back, not forward. Here is somebody who stood on a stage and said, we get rid of our nuclear weapons. We oppose austerity. We do this, we do that. And suddenly, there was clarity, certainty, a sense of mission once more. And that's why he was mobbed in Manchester last week in that wonderful cinematic vision of a party governing conference cocooned in a hall, and this warrior rebel leader speaking to the protesters outside. He appeared to offer certainty. But as some of you know from leading in the world of business or newspapers, leadership is tough. We all kind of like rebels in politics because they're romantic. Boris Johnson at the moment is agonizing about whether to be the romantic rebel and lead the out campaign in Europe. But in the end, it's a lot easier to be a rebel than to lead. And what is fascinating, which might be fleetingly fascinating, we don't know yet, is how Corbyn manages leadership. They're in a terrible mess this morning, as you might have heard, over they were going to support Osborne's fiscal of budget responsibility, Office of Budget Responsibility Charter. Now they're going to oppose it. Some of them want to abstain. They have never had to think strategically. They have never had to work out how you unite a party, combine a party's values with policies, and convey them to the media, because the media still mediates. It's very interesting to hear about these 46 million readers each month. I'm not surprised. In this chaotic political world, in the end, people like us, actually, even addicts like me, do not watch politics 24 hours a day in the raw, so to speak. We depend on the mediators. And one of the tasks of leadership is to get the attention and at least respect of the media. I can suddenly understand more now why the likes of Blair, seemingly strong, he was nowhere near as strong as he appeared to be, was so reliant on the likes of Alistair Campbell to try and get a message out to the media. because we read these papers, whether it's on an iPad or in paper form, and form our views accordingly. And incidentally, I come from the BBC. The BBC reads newspapers and form a lot of their views or look at politics through the prism of what they read in the newspapers. But while Labour are going through this identity crisis, the Conservatives too are in quite a fragile position. Because they won unexpectedly, to help me justify this metaphor of rock and roll politics, we overlook a bit, I think, the fragility of their majority in the House of Commons. And although it is unquestionably true that one of your MPs for Tatton, George Osborne, seems like the great commanding figure of British politics, there's one law in politics. Whenever the media decides someone is commanding, they are becoming fragile and vulnerable. Osborne has several challenges. One, there is a slight gap, actually, between his powerful, tonal, one nation Tory politics, his budget in the summer. We have fought a long path, and now the time has come, and Britain deserves a pay rise, and under this government, Britain will get a pay rise. Actually, as you know, with this tax credits dispute, a lot of people are getting a pay cut. And Osborne now finds from his budget being hailed as the greatest work of art since Shakespeare, is now having to sort of revise some of the things he said then. It's also the case for Osborne that being leader in waiting is a hugely pressurized post. Leaders in waiting in British politics never become leader, or hardly ever. Gordon Brown was the exception. But he almost killed himself to get it, and killed others en route to get it. And he wanted it from age 6 months. Rumour has it his first words were, "I want to be leader of the Labour Party and Prime Minister, and Tony Blair's not going to get in my way." That was when he was 6 months old. So he's got this enormous pressure now, Osborne, of everything being seen through that prism. And he will be constantly tested. And the Northern Powerhouse, which is a brilliant, an interesting story, I think, for regional papers around here. And I went to an extraordinary event. Some of you might have been there last week at the Tory conference. There was a Northern Powerhouse fringe meeting away from the conference cocooned centre in the Granada studios. And it was packed. And Osborne was the main speaker. And most of the people in the audience, or a lot of them, were sort of Labour council leaders. And Osborne was saying, it's great to see the leader of Manchester Council, they're great to see. And they were all Labour leaders kind of paying homage to Osborne, and Osborne was paying homage to them. It's a dynamic which is really interesting. And he will be fantastically fruitful, I think, for papers around here to make sense of him and what he's doing. But of course, the test, it's a cliche, will be in the delivery. Whether the Northern Powerhouse becomes a genuine centre of economic activity in the way that he envisages. And then there's Europe. Europe is the great wild card of British politics. This referendum that Cameron and Osborne didn't want to hold, they did it because their party was split on the issue and UKIP was posing a threat. And in the current sort of shook up rock and roll politics of UK politics, it really could go either way, this referendum. And if they were to lose it, Cameron and Osborne, there will be a political earthquake which will get me saying politics is all shook up for the next 10 years. Because if they lose it, Cameron goes immediately. Osborne's leadership aspirations are dead as the architect of the renegotiation. Scotland will call for a separate referendum again on independence, and we're in a whole new world. If they win it, things will be a bit calmer, perhaps, although referendums rarely calm anything down, as we know from Scotland. So there are lots of things going on, and to make sense of it, in my view, genuinely, as someone who writes for newspapers, but as a reader, and as someone who's done those broadcasts for the 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock news at 10, those 2-minute packages, which Robert Peston is getting £10 million for now at ITN, you can't convey the drama, the absurdity, the tragedy in the way that you can in print. Both are necessary. And if you look at Twitter, the debates about some of the themes I've been exploring very briefly this morning, are all related to newspaper columnists, newspaper front pages. There is a dance around all these things, of which print is an integral part. So thank you very much. Those are just a few kind of thoughts. We've got a few minutes if anyone would like to ask any questions about Corbyn, Osborne, Northern Powerhouse, the media. Anyone like to start? If not, I'll just carry on. But yeah, at the back there, and then. Will Boris, sorry, there is a mic. Will Boris become the next leader of the Conservative Party? When I did one of these shows in London recently, packed audience actually, I put a bet with the audience that he wouldn't be the next leader of the Conservative Party. I got a bit worried actually at the Tory conference because he delivered quite a powerful speech and the audience loved it. I've just got a feeling that, talking about test of leadership, that when it comes to it, the erratic flaws in his personality that are lovable as a mayor of London. Here I am upside down on a trapeze artist. Where am I? Am I in London? Yes, I'm in London. Blah, blah, blah. And here I am on Have I Got News for You? All that lovable stuff becomes a bit more challenging, even during a leadership contest. I think he will be asked about all kinds of things that went on in his life. And I've got a feeling he's not going to get it. I think it will be one of the others. Do you agree? Right, not sure. No, I think the joy of politics is, unlike football where you can predict virtually everything, politics is totally unpredictable. I think there was somebody in front. Yeah. Sorry, enough for Corbyn to be... Red blood cells. So there are enough Corbynistas in the country to be successful. All the evidence says no. But the most interesting conversation I've had about Corbyn, of the sort of 25,000 conversations I've had about it, is, funnily enough, not with a person from the Labour Party, but Paddy Ashdown of the Lib Dems. Ashdown is quite a kind of perceptive observer of politics. He was quite smart about Blair, quite smart about Cameron, completely wrong about Nick Clegg, actually, but that's another matter, as it turned out. But Ashdown said to me, with Corbyn, he's convinced that 80% of it is doomed quickly, but there's just 20% of it that is part of a new zeitgeist that none of us have quite got. And I think that's about right. All the evidence suggests he's doomed in every respect. I can't even see how he gets through the next month with his parliamentary Labour Party opposed to him and openly disdainful. It's an unbelievable situation. People compare it with Michael Foot in 1980. It's not. Labour MPs had voted for Foot. The Labour MPs are out to get him. And openly so. No one knows what Labour's position is on Trident, on Osborne's deficit strategy and so on. He himself would be 71 by the time of the next general election. And in the modern media world, it is so draining being a leader of a party. I don't quite see how he does it. But the 20% that Ashdown refers to is what happened in Scotland, the rise of UKIP during the European elections. They got more votes than any other party. The whole Greece thing, Spain, and all the rest of it. Some of the wacky candidates in the United States, what's his name, Trump, and then there's a left equivalent, Sanders or something. Something is happening, and in that something, maybe he will... flourish is too strong. He's not going to flourish. The circumstances are impossible for him. But maybe he will articulate something that resonates a bit more than those of us stuck in Westminster have even started to understand. Something weird is going on, which is why this referendum in Europe is so dangerous. It's a very febrile atmosphere. Got time for one more. I've promised to end on the dot, so we've got time for one more. Yes? Yeah.
He's not going to be coming in on his big white horse. So why?
It's impossible for David Miliband for lots of reasons. A, David, I know both the brothers, and some of you might have come across them. They're lovely. They're basically left-of-centre academics. David is not a better presenter of politics and language than Ed Miliband, as you can see from his post-mortem on the election. We must turn the page forward, not back. I mean, what does that mean? B, the Labour Party, having had a series of identity crises, the Jeremy Corbyn phase, is not going to elect another brother, having elected one Miliband. It would take a psychiatrist to explain, frankly, the election of another brother, and it's just not going to happen. And David, it would be much better for David, who's a lovely bloke, to realise that. I think he wants to get into the House of Commons and sees himself exactly in that role, the heroic saviour. But he is not actually a great public communicator, and in the same way that his brother wasn't. Their politics are slightly different. But I think as public personas, both are flawed, and so they won't go for him. But I can't tell you how much he would love to do it. And I don't think the two brothers will ever recover from that trauma of Ed beating him. That's another drama for another day. I've got to stop, but thank you so much for listening and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.